Okay, for our third part of this lesson 2, we want to look at least common multiple. Least common multiple is the smallest integer that is a multiple of every element of a set of integers. So for instance, we're looking for maybe a least common multiple of something like 8 and 15. Now let's make it easier than that. 8 and 14. Okay, and so we're looking for the least common multiple of 8 and 14. Actually, we're going to make it even easier than that. Let's do 8 and 10. So one way to go about doing this is listing out multiples of 8. Well, the first multiple of 8 is just 8 itself. Then you have 16, right? 8 times 2. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 40, 48. Hopefully you're recognizing we're just adding 8 each time. Okay. And then also for 10, it's going to be 10. This is an easy one to write down the multiples. 20, 30, 40. And if you notice, I just wrote down a number that is common to both of the multiples of these two numbers. So the least common multiple of 8 and 10 is 40. Now, if you notice, if you did the prime factorization of any of these numbers, doesn't matter which one you pick. Let's say we pick 56. The prime factorization, if you went through and worked it out on your own, of 56 is 2 to the third times 7. The prime factorization of 8 is 2 to the third. Every multiple of 8 has got to include 2 to the third in it. That's an important thing when understanding how to find these answers. Same thing for 10. 10 is 2 times 5. No matter which one of these you pick, so for instance 60 turns out to be, if you did the prime factorization, if you went through and did it on a separate piece of paper, it's 2 squared times 3 times 5. That's the prime factorization. Notice how it has a 2 and a 5, the 2 times 5. So every multiple of any number has to include the original prime factorization. So our answer always has to include the original prime factorization of both numbers. So if we look at example 1, and what's the prime factorization, or the least common multiple of 24 and 40, one method is to use the prime factorization. So the prime factorization of 24, again, you can work this out on your own. We're to the point where you should be able to do that on your own. I'm just going to tell you what they are. The prime factor of 24 is 2 to the third times 3. The prime factorization of 40 is 2 to the third times 5. So what we do, since we want the least number, we first have to find out what they have in common. Okay, so the first thing we're always trying to do is find out, well, what do these have in common? Well, what they have in common is, in this case, is 2 to the third. Okay, so they have a 2 to the third in common. So we know that that has to be a part of our least common multiple. But we also know that we have to have everything from this. So that means I need to include a 3, right? Because every multiple of 24 has a 3 in it. And every multiple of 40 has a 5 in it. So I need to include a 5 as well. So my least common multiple of 24 and 40 is 2 to the third times 3 times 5, which equals, you can multiply it out, but you're going to get 120. So the least common multiple of 24 and 40 is 120. And that's using the prime factorizations. You don't have to use the prime factorizations, though. You can use the reverse division. If you do reverse division with two numbers, it's very simple. You basically start out like you're finding least common or greatest common factor. 2 goes into both 24 and 40, so that gives me 12 and 20. 2 goes into both 12 and 20, that gives me 6 and 10. 2 goes into both 6 and 10, that gives me 3 and 5. The greatest common factor is 2 times 2 times 2. Least common multiple is the whole thing. 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 5. A lot of people, when you're doing least common multiple, like to use this reverse division. I would suggest using reverse division because I think it's easier when you start looking at 3 numbers. So your answer is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 5, which equals 120. So I'm going to use reverse division each time, but if you like prime factorization, you can use that. That's fine. So we want to do our example 24 and 54. Be a good idea at this point to stop the video, try this problem on your own. It's always better to try example problems first, then go and watch the teacher show how it's done. So I'm going to do 24 and 54 though. I'm going to use reverse division. So I know 2 goes into both of these, so 12 and 27. 2 goes into 54 27 times. Okay, I look at 12 and 27. Obviously, 2 doesn't go into both of them, but 3 does. So it's going to be 4 and 9. Well, if we look at these two, I'm not going to draw that line in because 4 and 9 are relatively prime, so we're done with reverse division. So we do 2 times 3 times 4 times 9, which is going to be your answer. So that's going to give you 24 times 9, which equals, I don't have my calculator with me, so it's going to equal 216. So the least common multiple of 24 and 54 is 216. And again, that's because we multiplied the L together, if you want to think of it, for least common multiple. Greatest common factor, you just multiply this. Least common multiple with the L, you multiply the L together. Okay, now the third example we're going to look at here is 3 of them. Now the difference for 3 is there's an extra component to it. So the first thing we do is the same. We look at it and we say, what do all 3 of them have in common? Well, what you're going to find out in this example is that they don't have anything in common. So now we have to look at, and this is for 3 or more numbers, is there anything that 2 of the numbers have in common? In this case, yes. If you notice, 25 and 45 both have a 5 in them. So now this is not going to give us the greatest common factor, but it will give us the least common multiple. So 5 goes into 25 5 times. 5 goes into 45 9 times. 5 doesn't go into 54, so we didn't factor anything out of it. Now we look, does anything go into any other 2? Well, 5 is prime, and 5 doesn't go into 9 or 54. But if you look at 9 and 54, we know that 3 goes into both of them. So that's going to be 5 and 3. 3 goes into 54 18 times. If you notice, 3 goes into both of these. You could have taken 9 out at this point, but we're used to taking just prime numbers. But you don't have to always take out prime numbers. 3 goes into both of them again. So that's going to be 1. That's nice. And then 6. And so now nothing goes into any pair of these. And so now the product of the L is our least common multiple. So 5 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 6 is going to be your answer. And so that's going to end up being, well, 5 times 9 is 45. 5 times 6 is 30. So 45 times 30 is going to give you 1350. So the least common multiple, the smallest number that would be a multiple of all of these would be 1350. So when you have multiple numbers, remember, these numbers only have to go into 2 out of the 3 or 4 or 5 or how many numbers you have. And you keep going till there's nothing that goes into all those, and then you multiply everything together on the outside, and that is your least common multiple. And I think this is the best way to do it, so I would suggest doing it that way.